Hello, everyone. This is Vince and Sherry from PastorLife. We're here today to talk about the second part of stewardship and finances, and that is facing your debt. Not a very popular thing to talk about, but it is something that is necessary in a healthy relationship.
That's right. And this is one of a two-parter that we're going to do about debt. We're going to have a second part to talking about debt, but today we're going to be talking about facing your debt and how difficult it is to talk about money. I think that's one of the things as we were preparing this video, you can sort of feel tensions rise when you start talking about money, and it's God's money. How are we going to handle the money that we have? What are the important things we need to say about facing our debt? And I think you brought up a great point from the very start that everything that we have is God's.
Everything that we have, everything that comes our way is from the hand of God. And that's something that's very important to remember when it comes to finances. I'll tell you, I do premarital counseling for people that want to get married, and I focus on three areas. It's like a 3 one-hour segments of marriage. The first one is the spiritual part of being married, how you want to marry somebody that is equally yoked. The second part is the physical. That's not just the intimacy, that's how you communicate, how you talk, who takes out the trash, who cuts the grass,
practical
the
things.
practical stuff. The third one is the financial. Now, that's how important finances is in a marriage, because if you fail to keep what I call normal, there's no perfect spiritual, there's no perfect financial, there's no perfect
finance.
Yeah, but it is keeping it healthy. And part of a healthy relationship is communicating with our spiritual side, our physical side, and our financial side. I always tell them, I have seen couples stay together, and physically they may be in different rooms. They may be like roommates, but they stay together. I've seen them stay together spiritually. They may be a believer and a non-believer, but they get along well. They're good people. They just don't see eye to eye. But I have never seen a couple stay together when the finances go bad, when it gets so bitter.
And then they refuse to get over it. Yeah.
Refuse to deal with
That's
it.
right.
Refuse to deal with it. So we thought that we would spend some time talking about facing your debt. Now, if you're watching and you're thinking, man, I wish my spouse could watch this, at a later date, get your spouse to sit down with you and watch this together, because it's very important that you do this as a family, because it is very important to communicate on all things, but especially on debt.
That's right, because you are a team.
Yes.
And I think that's the way we can view our marriage. We're a team, and we're on the same team. We're pulling for each other and with each other for the common good of the entire household.
Yes.
And so finances is not like your finances and mine. Now, we know that some people that are watching this video today may be single, and perhaps your spouse has passed, or you may be a younger person that's not married yet, or an older person. But whatever the case may be, even if you're single and if you're married, being responsible with your finances is so important, and it will add to the enjoyment of your life. But specifically today, I think we're primarily talking to married people, although the way you handle your finances as a single person is also very important.
Very important.
So I wanted to point that out as well.
Right.
There are several different kinds of debt that we can find ourselves in, and so I thought I would just hit the highlights of those debts. Now, one of those debts is secured debt, and to me, that is probably, if you're going to have debt, it's one of the best kinds. Is debt where you can actually reach out and touch something that either has kept its value or has increased in value, and primarily this would probably be considered like a house.
A house, a car, something that you can go out and touch. Could be a big amount, could be a small amount, but it is something that you can see and touch.
Right, and of course, cars don't hold their value, and they usually don't go up in value unless you have some kind of specialty car. But you can go out if you're making a payment. You can touch that car and you can see what you're paying for.
Right.
And that would be considered a secured debt, I think. And then we have a medical debt. That's something a lot of people are facing today because costs have risen so much in the health field. And if you get sick or you go in the hospital, you might find yourself with a medical debt that you're facing. There is that revolving debt. And we talked about, what's a revolving debt? What might that be? That might be a debt like you would have with a department store or maybe furniture store or something like that. And so you have purchased something maybe like furniture or a computer or something, and you are making payments on that. And it's not really a secured debt, but it's a revolving debt for something that you can see that.
I think that's probably, I hate to say the worst kind of debt, but it's the easiest to get into because it can be an impulse buy. You know, you see a pair of shoes and you think, man, if one of them's good, 3 of them have to be better.
That's right, even better.
That impulse buying thing. And then 2 months passes, you're getting the bill and the interest rate is phenomenal. It's crazy. And you think, what did I buy? And you can't remember. If you cannot remember what you've bought, then
right.
chances are it's revolving.
That's right, revolving debt. And that would also be considered, I guess, like unsecured debt. And that's probably the worst. I mean, revolving debt can be when your couch has fallen apart, your children have broken it, you have nowhere to sit, and you think, I'll pay for this. Sometimes you can get like 6 months without any interest, or like same as cash or something like that. And that would be considered, I guess, sort of like a revolving debt. You know what you bought. You only have that one thing that you're paying for, and so you know what it's for. But unsecured debt is a bunch of stuff that you have no idea what it is you bought. It might be clothes that you found on sale or anything that you can't really touch now, but you're still making payments on it. That's like the worst.
The worst.
That's not very good. And then another growing problem in our country today is student loans. I was looking up about student loans, and it says that we owe $1.75 trillion in student debt. And so many students that I know right now have loans that they're trying to pay off. And the tough part about these loans is the government can step in and confiscate your money to help pay this debt off. So they can come in and take money from, let's say you're getting a tax refund, they can take that money. They can take money out of your weekly paycheck for those student loans if you're not paying them. So you really are being like hijacked when you get into student debt. And so my advice to that would be really careful when you're going into college. Look at, I know when kids, and especially as a parent, you want your kids to get to go to the best school possible.
Have that great experience and all that.
And there's a tremendous pressure when you're looking at a high school graduate and they're wanting so desperately to go to that big school and pay all that money. All of our kids went to, even though they were smart, they went to community colleges at first, and they had scholarship money to do it. Matter of fact, I don't know in the beginning if any of our kids had to pay any tuition because they had so much scholarship money, and they were able to go to a community college where the expenses were reasonable.
Yes.
So these are some things to consider because the pressure, even for a parent, is great. For your child to succeed and be happy, maybe your child is begging, but then you get saddled with that huge debt that you're paying for years. And I know some people that are in their 40s and 50s and they're still paying on their student loans. That is a really big burden. So these are some of the kinds of debts that
they're out there.
They're
folks.
out there.
They're out there.
And perhaps today you're looking at the big picture in your life and you think, oh man, I have one of these kinds of debt. And it's something I don't even want to talk about, especially with my spouse. I don't even want to think about it for myself because I don't know how I'm going to get out of this kind of debt. Matter of fact, I've got so many debts. I couldn't tell you what I owe to which card or to which lender. I don't know my mortgage. I don't know my car payment. I don't know how much more money I owe on it. I don't know how many credit cards I even have. I just know each month I have to pay something on them. And if you're in that situation where you haven't sat down with a pen and paper and written all of this out, today is the day.
I think the key part is communicating.
Yes.
And when you're married and you have debt, and the key part of it is sitting down as adults. I think sometimes debt makes us nervous.
Yes.
There's times when you get a bill maybe in the mail and you don't want to open it up. You think, well, I'll just leave it there, like something magical is going to happen to it. Right. That's really not the way to deal with it. To face your debt, I think you need to sit down as a couple and not play the blame game to say, well, you bought this 3 months ago, or you bought this on Amazon, or you did this. That time has passed. You're a team. You have to work together. And the most important part, what helped us facing our debt, was sitting down like two adults. And sitting down, and I think Sherry's going to look at it just in a minute. There's 2 words that come to when you sit down and you start looking at your debt and your finances. What are those 2 words, honey?
Is the incoming and the outgoing. And I will say this too about when you sit down with your spouse, and I hope if each partner is listening to this video today, look at yourself first. What are some areas where you have failed? You may say, you know what? I didn't really go out and run up the credit cards. I didn't do anything. But you didn't communicate about money and you didn't express the importance it is to you not to have credit card debt. You just ignored it. Now, you saw that there were things in the house that were appearing, and you could see that maybe your spouse was always having new clothes. You saw that your spouse was overbuying gifts for the kids. You had to know something was going on, most likely, and yet you kind of chose not to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so you have to look at yourself. And if you look at the other person and start blaming them, it really shuts down communication quickly. But look at yourself and say, what was my part in this situation?
I think with our debt, and we faced our debt and dealt with it, but what I would tell Sherry is we had 4 children, and if there was a need, I would tell her, fix it, take care of it. And that was my fault. I would leave that responsibility on her to find a way to take care of torn out transmission or other issues that come up with raising children. And instead of me being, the responsible husband, I was just telling her to fix it. So the communication failure was on my part. Like I say, I was asking her to do something, didn't know how she was going to do it, just fix it.
And then when I would use a credit card, I didn't always bother him with telling him how I had taken care of the problem. And then later when the bill came in, it would be an issue like, oh my goodness, where did this come from? And so, I felt bad because I was a homemaker raising these 4 children and taking care of these 4 children without an income. So I had some guilt there. I was like, man, maybe I should try to just leave these kids on their own and go out and try to find a job, So we each have our own thing that we're dealing with, the luggage, you might say, that
there's
we're
enough
with.
guilt to go around.
A lot to go around.
Remember, your spouse, I believe this, is the best friend you'll ever have, other than the Lord Jesus in your life. So you always take care of your spouse, you always encourage them, and you'd just be surprised what positive response you get back by being kind to your spouse. Now, if you've been ugly to them for 20 years, one day of being nice may not make a significant change, but it's a step in the right direction.
Right.
So
that's right. And I think, using that example that Jesus gave us of love and forgiveness and facing things that are uncomfortable together, looking at our own lives and examining our own sin before we try to find sin in someone else, it puts us in the right frame of mind to face finances in a way that honors God.
Yeah, and don't be overwhelmed when you start looking at your debt. Philippians 4:13 tells us this: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Amen.
So don't be overwhelmed. I mean, this is just a first sit down to talk about it. You have to be on the same page. You have to take responsibility, and you have to see that finish line. So Christ can help you through anything.
Yes, He can.
So he will give you the strength to deal with this issue of debt and how to face it.
And that's what helped us. The number one thing we did when we looked at our debt, and our 4 children were growing up, and we were still trying to help them some, and we looked at the debt that we had, and it wasn't over frivolous things. It was over helping our family with needs and other things that had come along. And so when we looked at it, we were like, Lord, please help us to get rid of this debt. Help us to be responsible in paying this off so we can be out from under this burden. We're a team, and we're going to find a way to do it. And so what we did first is we sat down that day. I remember it was a tense day. It was not comfortable. Talking about money is not always comfortable. But we sat down with a piece of paper and we wrote down all the debts that we had, and we wrote down all the income that we had coming in. And we began to look at the difference, and there wasn't a huge amount of difference. It was taking a lot of our money just to pay our debts and to live with the expenses that we had. Perhaps you're a person today when you're like, I just don't want to look at this because I know what's going to happen. The money that I have going out is much more than the money I have coming in. And what did you say that was, honey?
Debt.
Debt.
When you have more going out than you have coming in, that is debt. But you need to sit down. And our goal was not just to manage debt. Our goal was to eliminate it.
That's right.
So that was our goal from the outset. You can't do everything in one day, but once your mind is made up, you almost have to speak it.
Yes, you do.
You almost have to agree and say, we don't want this in our lives. It might take a year, it might take 3 years, it might take 5 years.
It might take 10.
It might take 10, but we do not want to be managed by debt, and we do not want to pay that high interest for something that we've already used.
That's right. And so this is an area where I think a lot of people begin to bow up. They don't want to sit down with a piece of paper. They want to talk about it. It's okay to talk about it. I mean, they might be willing to talk a little bit about it. To actually sit down and run the numbers is overwhelming to them. Like they can feel their blood pressure going up. They feel like they're going to have a panic attack. You don't want to see it, but facing it is the only way to deal with the giant in front of you.
Amen.
And so we know that God makes us overcomers. He is already in us, and He has won every battle. We just have to accept our responsibility, look at it in black and white, and come up with a game plan. And that's what we did when we started facing our debt. And God has done tremendous things in our lives. Do you know that when we first really sat down with a pencil and paper and faced our debt, within 8 months, we had purchased a home. And then within just maybe, 6 more months, we had purchased a second car for our family. And wow.
You're thinking, wow, how can you go in debt more?
Yeah.
No,
we paid for it. Yeah.
We eliminated a lot of
of
debt.
debt.
And then we'll get into how we did that. But the first step is sitting down, facing it,
That's right.
writing down what you got coming in. I know you're going to say, well, Pastor, we're on a limited income. Listen, we're all on a limited income.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. There's a
Yes.
limit unless you pick up another job somewhere. We're pretty much making what we make. So we learn to live on what we make.
The majority of years that we have been married, we've lived on one income with 6 people. And it was a real challenge, I will admit that. And one of the reasons I actually started my YouTube channel, when I was praying about this, God led me to start a YouTube channel, and He said, if you got enough followers going, you could earn a little money to help with some insurance needs that we had at the time. And so God opens all kinds of doors when you begin to pray about your finances, and He will open doors for you just like He did for us. We've seen Him do it so many times. But the very first step that you need to do is to sit down and look at your incoming versus the outgoing. See all of your bills written down and what are your minimum monthly payments. Write all of that down in a book. You had a book, I had a book. We each had our own books, and for 12 months, and I know that seems like a long time.
You can't do this forever,
No.
folks. I think the key of this facing your debt, once you get that established and you've got a plan, what we did, and of course we'll be talking about that in the next video, you can only do for so many months. We chose 12 months. For you, it might be 6 months. It's hard to keep that kind of intensity up.
And what we're not saying that what you're doing right now, you can't do forever. We're not talking about taking care of your debt.
Right.
Once your debt's taken care of, I think once you go through the pain of it, you'll always be mindful of it after that. What we're saying is those initial moments when you're throwing everything that you can towards your debt, that intensity of talking about your debt every single day with your spouse, you really won't be able to do that forever because that intensity begins to wane over a period of time.
And I think there's a certain amount of time that you do something where it becomes a habit.
66 days.
66 days. So, when you start doing this, like when we kind of turned away from credit cards, we have one that we pay off every month, just the one. But at one time we had several. Now, once you stop using those, and you almost get into the habit that that's not how we handle our finances. So it's not like we did something for 12 months and went back to the old way of living.
Right.
No. Once we got into the habit of handling finances the way that we did, we never went back to the old way.
No, because the new way was so much better.
Oh, yes.
And we saw our savings grow. We saw our lives change. And our goals became more unified. I think our marriage became even better than it already was. We were stronger in doing things this way. God has blessed us immensely in the period of time that we've been doing this. We still talk about money, and any expenses that come up, we make it very clear, how are we going to pay for this? We ask and are up front because we did the hard work of beginning to talk about it for months. Now it's not as hard to talk about our personal money and how, if you have a medical expense or something, how are we going to pay for it? And you're able to do such a better job of just having a similar goal. After you go through this rigorous beginning of sitting down with the incoming and outgoing, lining up your creditors, and then beginning to tackle paying that off. And that leads us into our next video that we're going to be doing. In our next video, we're going to be talking about how do we get out of debt.
That's right.
And in 3 years' time, we were out of debt for everything except our house. And we had a very reasonable mortgage. So that was something that we were able to accomplish through God's help and through this same method that we're talking to you about
Yeah. And don't be overwhelmed, folks.
Yes.
When you're looking at your debt, you really have to be on board. If you have a spouse, both of you sit down and need to watch this video. You have to be in agreement. This is what we want. You have to want the same thing, and it can be done. But don't be overwhelmed by it. You're thinking, oh, we owe too much. We have too many credit cards. Let's just make the minimum. Let's make the most of life. You don't want to live that way. You don't want to live being in debt to another human being. So you can do this. We did it. On one income, you can do it. You can do it.
Yes, you can. And I think that what we face is we know that in life, sometimes things come up. If someone gets sick, you may have
Part
to
of life.
Yeah, some medical payments may have to be made over a period of several years. That's understandable. You may go through a job loss or something where for a short period of time you might have to pay your bills on a credit card, and you can't beat yourself up for that. But what you can do is pray that God will give you a way to be able to manage that and effectively pay it off as soon as possible. When we make these goals for ourselves, we're able to achieve them so much better than if we never make a goal at all.
Yes, and I think you can enjoy life. You do not have to be in debt to enjoy life. I think you're going to enjoy life a whole lot more not being in debt.
You really do feel empowered when you
Yes.
take control of your money. So this is how you can face your debt as we faced ours years ago. And we were able to get out of debt by doing a few simple steps that you might also be able to do. And we are going to talk about that in our next video.
Thank you for listening. This is Vince and Sherry from PastorLife. Just reminding you, if you've not subscribed, you just hit that subscribe button, share with a friend. It lets us know that we're trying to make a difference in the lives of pastors and the lives of lay people, and the way that we honor Christ. And one of those ways is with our finances.
Yes. Talk to you soon.
God bless.
Bye-bye.